Bringing back a decade later, this time looking at The Roots, how I got over. The legendary hip-hop group The Roots have amassed so many hip-hop classics under their belt, and the majority of people would, in the hip-hop world, would agree that most of the albums considered classics are some of the best in the genre of all time. Namely, Things Fall Apart, of course, that one being generally considered their best one, but then you also have albums like Phrenology and even Game Theory, and perhaps even more recently, even more so than How I Got Over, you've got Undone. Undone obviously being their 2011 release, considered one of their best, even so late into their career. They're still killing it with releases, although their one in 2014 wasn't particularly all that enjoyable, wasn't really considered one of their best, but I still think late in their career they're putting out fantastic music, because How I Got Over is included in that list, and for me, How I Got Over is in fact my favourite Roots album, period, just their best one to me. You may remember from my decade list, hopefully you have watched that, I'll obviously link it as well here, but it was very high on that decade list, in the top 10 of the entire decade for me personally. I explain why in that video, but also considering it's a decade later here, may as well explain in big detail as to why I think it is their best. You can see other arguments for albums in their discography being better than this, I get it, but for me, it's one of those hip-hop albums just in general, not even in their discography, just overall, that just hits me from start to finish. I just find it to be such a super relaxing listen. The choruses and refrains, hooks, every track are just so damn nice, whether it's a guest feature, whether it's a sample. They just work them in so effortlessly on every song. The production here is really top notch. We've got the verses mostly carried by Black Thought, who is just super thought-provoking on every track. Sure, not every bar is amazing, not everything he puts out there is, absolutely god tier, but I just think the way he's rhyming, the way he's flowing over these tracks is just so enjoyable, and I find this album just hits a spot that not many hip-hop albums seem to do, really. The presentation is super straightforward across this entire album. It's not exactly they're experimenting with every track. You're not exactly getting wacky instrumentals, wacky flows, something like Danny Brown would have given us in the 2010s, or even many other rappers too. It's actually just very much indebted to the simplicity of many hip-hop albums. In the 90s, you've got a standard beat, you got jazzy samples, soulful samples, you got a chorus, you got rappers rhyming with really interesting lyricism. Like, it's just very much a standard hip-hop album, but why it works as well as it does, I can't explain it. I think it's just the Roots. The Roots just have a way. The piano-led instrumental on Walk Alone is stellar, and then you've got Dice Raw's hook. Dice Raw actually provides most of the hooks across this album, and every single one he does is a killer. He never misses on this album, never misses. But then Black Thought's verse with that really crazy rhyme scheme he's got going on, everything essentially rhyming with like alone, and then he's got like words like home, but then there's so many other words that he throws in there that just don't quite make sense, but he manages to do it sort of like in a way that, someone like Eminem would do it. But I guess often what Eminem does is ruin it with a really terrible joke, or just kind of rhymes things for the sake of rhyming a lot of the time. Other rappers do that too, it's not just him. But Black Thought does it in a way that's interesting and actually keeps to the topic and somehow makes everything make sense, even though when you're reading it, you're just a bit like, damn, how did he link these things together? Another thing I love about this album too is how this track and many other tracks seamlessly flow into one another. You don't even get any pauses. It's just a beat. The instrumental just progresses into the next track really nicely. I love that about a lot of albums. There are many albums out there that you come across and each track just kind of follows on into each other. It's a really creative way to make an album, I think, and again, it just adds to the quality of the music here. It's important to remember that the Roots are just a huge, giant band, so the musicianship on many of these tracks is stellar because of how talented the people are working on these tracks. I mean, it's pretty easy to see why they've ended up being such like a staple on Jimmy Fallon's late night show. Not something I watch, it's not really something that you would come across in the UK. You can usually watch things on, you know, YouTube or clips online, but it's not really something that's common here. We have our own talk show guys, but of course he is really popular in America, and the Roots fucking deserve that. If there's anything the Roots deserve, it is just a late night slot where they're presenting their fantastic musicianship on a show to millions of people. Like, it had to be the Roots. They're just so talented. Black Thought's always had a way of kind of intertwining religion and religious aspects into his music. He's done it for a long time. Even on that EP as well from a few years ago, which was really impressive, that I think it was 2018, there were tracks that were very religious inspired. Here on Dear God, he's just, you know, writing message to God, talking about how he's working way too much, just generally speaking on things in life that he's just not fully happy with. He's asking for forgiveness for his shortcomings, and then towards the end of the track he asks the question, why is life such a fight to the end? Which is a pretty straightforward question to ask. I'm sure many people have asked it many times across the life of our existence, but I think it is a poignant question, and it's just so straightforward and straight to the point. Much of this track is generally focusing on the fact that there are many struggles out there for Black Thought, and despite the fact that he is so successful in life, because you would look at him and think he's a very successful person, had a successful career, and it doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that the emotional side of things during life do take over, and there are many things he just wants to speak to God about. Radio Days, another fantastic hook from Dice Raw. Don't know what else I can say about those hooks. I love them. They always get stuck in my head too. It's really the best way, I think, to make a hip-hop album. If you're going to use hooks, you don't necessarily have to have hooks, choruses or whatever on your rap album, but if you're going to, you need to make it memorable. And I just think every track here has a memorable chorus, and that's exactly the way to my heart. That is it. That's how you get there. Black Thought once again giving us something completely fresh every time with his verses. I like the way he flows on this one. But then you got How I Got Over in the midsection of the album though, which I think is definitely the highlight for Black Thought's rapping, and on the entire album. I think everything about this track is just killer. I had it in my top 100 tracks for the decade for a reason. I just absolutely adore this track. The beat, the flows that Black Thought provides on each verse, something slightly different each time. The chorus as well. So many great bars coming throughout. Black Thought references being kind of like on the edge, having police around the corner at every turn. Talking about the struggles that people have in life and how you kind of have to take it upon yourself as well, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to be there for you when you're wilding out. Nobody's going to be there for you when you're having your worst moments. So you got to take it upon yourself, insert some responsibility and make a change for yourself as well, and also just look after yourself. That's essentially this track. It's very much old man raps, but I think the message is really strong as well. He's here offering advice to the youth here, really, because obviously he was in that position once, but now he's showing the people how they can get over How I Got Over. The Day is a pretty straightforward track on a lyrical level, but you do have Blue and Fonte coming through with their verses. Another lovely hook here as well. This time it isn't Dice Raw, but the vocalist on this track sounds fantastic. And what I like about the tone of her voice is that it is kind of similar to Joanna Newsom's in a bit of a strange way, but then of course once the track is over it does flow into the next one. Of course you do get Joanna Newsom's amazing voice coming through on Right On. This track, man, this track, the Roots made it work. Who out there can do this? You do not just sample Joanna Newsom in a hip-hop track. You don't get that. Like, if you don't know who Joanna Newsom is, or you don't know the Roots are, and you're just watching his video because you're like, well, I'm interested to see what he's going to say, because maybe I'm going to find out about a new album. If you are one of those people, this sample idea came from fucking aliens. How do you just put Joanna Newsom on a song like this? It worked. It worked. How? I don't know. Made even better for me, because I would say it's one of my favorite of her entire discography, this track, Book of Right On. is one of my favorite Joanna songs. So to hear it in this context just impresses me like nothing else out there. The track The Fire is once again Black Thought showing his wisdom. A lot of this album is essentially just him offering his words of wisdom, talking about how, you know, let that fire burn inside you, let that passion just reap, and it will take you places, essentially. And John Legend on this track, he always kills it when you hear him on a feature on a hip-hop song. Like, every now and then you hear him on a track with a rapper, and every time he just kills it. I think he has just a great amount of soul to his voice that makes it work each time you hear him on a track, and this is no different. Really is no different. He kills it. One of the best tracks here, easily. But then by the end of the album, we do get the closing track, which feels like an homage, a bit of a throwback to the late 80s. Feels like that period of hip hop that just was very animated, very lyrical, spiritual, miracle type stuff with the rapping going on here. Very cartoonish instrumental. It really doesn't fit in with the album actually at all, but I just enjoy it for how fun it is. It's kind of like they just threw everything to the side and just thought, fuck it, for this last track, we're just going to do whatever we want. For essentially all of the reasons I've just given in this video, it really is one of my favorite hip-hop albums ever, and just favorite albums ever in general. Favorite albums ever in general. If we're talking about 10 out of 10s, this is actually one of mine. This really is one of mine. This truly is an album that I just never find flaws with. Maybe, you know, not every verse is perfect. Maybe not, you know, every instrumental is the most unique thing you'll ever hear. So what? It doesn't need to be that way. It's the feeling that an album gives you that's more important. A perfect 10 out of 10 is essentially what's subjective to you as a listener, I think. There's no reason to, you know, go into the flaws of this album, because there probably are a lot. There probably are flaws to this album, I'm sure. I'm sure not every verse is amazing. Not every bar is absolutely, you know, thought-provoking or anything like that. But what it is that it's a personal, perfect album for me, in that I can just play it anytime. It flies the hell by. I have a great time with it, and that's all that matters. That's what makes it special to me. I couldn't not go and do a video for this one for a decade later, because it really is amongst my top like 25 albums ever. It's in that place. It's in there somewhere. Don't know where. It was in my top 10 of the decade for the 2010s. It really is just an album I hold so closely to me, and I hope you agree with it. What do you think of the album though? You might not think of it as highly as I do, but if you do love it, please let me know in the comments if it's your favorite hip-hop album of 2010, because it definitely is for me. You're probably going to say Dark Twisted Fantasy, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. You're probably going to say that, but the roots win for me. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you agree with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, where it ranks in their discography as well. That'd be great. Thank you for watching this video. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.